Let's touch on the player prop, or the player in particular that we like tonight. And it's Javonte Williams, the Broncos. I think we both like over 54.5 rushing yards. His carries prop seems, I like that as well. I like over 13.5 carries. That's only minus 110. But you said this earlier, and you had the exact same thought I did, which is, doesn't 13.5 carries seem like too low? Like way too low. Javonte Williams, first of all, he's getting healthier. So when you see his carries go up, carried the ball 15 times 2 weeks ago, carried 27 times the week after that, he's going to be fresh 15 days off between games when you're talking about Denver here, and Williams is getting healthier after suffering that season-ending injury last year. This feels like I'm actually scared away because the number seems too low carries-wise, so I think I'm going to go over his yardage prop, and I think you're with me here.
Yeah, I'll go yardage too, just because it feels like there is a higher ceiling on this one. Say he breaks off a big run and you can get a big chunk yardage play. And also the Bills have not been great at limiting those explosive plays. Because if you throw out last game, because I think it's tough to look at last game and say that that is, the standard one, just because that game was not close. That was a blowout game for the Broncos. So clearly they're going to run the ball a lot. But the game before that against the Packers, he only had 15 carries. I do think his carries are going up, but this is a play that you will be sweating probably until the end of the game. So I think I would rather play a prop in which I can get it more easily as opposed to waiting till the final minutes of this game to hope and pray that he gets a carry at the end there. But I do think he's the lead back. So I think I'll go with yardage here just because the Bills are giving up 4.9 yards per carry. If that is the case here, I think he should get his yardage play pretty early on into this game, especially if he finds a hole somewhere and knocks off a big chunk play.
You know what I want to happen? I want to tune in this game, and I want to get a handoff and go for 55 yards on the first play of the game. And I'll just turn it off and go to bed.
People play overs.
Yeah. I know it's not going to happen, but, man, that would be nice. And I think it goes back to the Bills and how bad they are at allowing explosive plays on the ground. So I think you can still hit this even if he doesn't get the carries, because there is a possibility. Now, the Bills have certainly all of the weaponry on offense to make this game a blowout. I don't anticipate that happening. But if for some reason the Broncos fall behind early or even midway through the game and they have to start passing the ball, then you're in real trouble where Javonte Williams could break off a long run and you're good, but he doesn't get the carries because the Broncos are playing from behind and they've got to catch up to Buffalo. And I think that's the sabotage factor there.
Yeah, so I think you just go with yardage as opposed to carries. And also, like I said, if a line seems fishy, you just don't play it. I think bottom line for me is, do we trust Buffalo as big favorites yet? Because we've seen them in games where they were favored by a lot and they've lost outright. Like they lost as 7.5-point favorites to the Patriots. They lost straight up to the Jaguars as 4.5-point favorites. So do you think the Bills fit that bill? Because in years past, I would say yes. And they're one of the top tier teams in the NFL. Mm-hmm. But this year, it just doesn't seem like a team you can trust. Do you think we have given Zach Wilson enough time? Do you think the book is truly written on him?
I do. And I agree with you. And I think we've seen this a few times in the NFL where we don't give these young guys. Let's not forget, there was a time when we didn't know if Jalen Hurts was going to be the guy in Philadelphia. It's easy to say now, but there were question marks like, we know he can run. Does he have enough to be a quarterback? Same thing with Tua Tagovailoa. Early on in his career, there was that time where he was always getting hit, having concussions, not really throwing the ball well, and those guys were question marks. Now here they are competing for MVPs. So I'm with you that it's important to give these guys a longer leash than fans generally give them and let them try to develop. I think the difference with Zach Wilson and those guys is that Tua would flash. Jalen Hurts would flash. Even Sam Howell for the Commanders, who's really starting to step up, he'll flash and he'll say, whoa, that's an NFL player right there. That's an NFL quarterback. So that's the difference where when Zach Wilson flashes, it's Zach Wilson not throwing an interception in a game. There's no real times when you think he really looks like an NFL quarterback. I just haven't seen that from him. So I think probably the book is written, yeah.
But what about the Jets in general? Because I think this is a team that we've seen, if they're getting a lot of points, maybe they're worth a play just because the defense routinely keeps this team in the game. So next up, the Jets have the Bills. So I'm interested to see that line. Maybe we will see if I have the guts and the gall to bet on the Jets there.
Who is your Monday MVP?
I got to get it to Jayden Daniels. I mean, what he did in that game is unbelievable. I thought about Caitlin Clark. Cody Schrader is a great story because he came from an FCS school. So to see him become just an absolute all-everything player in a huge game against Tennessee was awesome. But Jayden Daniels, we've been talking about this all season long. Even now, even though LSU doesn't necessarily have the record, well, they don't have the record of an Oregon or a Washington or a Michigan where you see Heisman Trophy favorites like a Bo Nix, like a Michael Penix Jr., like a J.J. McCarthy. The fact that Daniels is doing this in the SEC at the highest level is just unbelievable. And remember, he left the game last week in the fourth quarter because he was banged up. So in an SEC game to put on this sort of performance is just remarkable. I think he's probably the best player in college football. And I still feel like we're not talking about him enough, which is insane to say. But I'm going Jayden Daniels, LSU.
You know who we're not talking about enough? CJ Stroud of the Houston Texans. How is he not even on this list? Listen, we went down this road just last week here on the Daily Tip. Should we be talking about CJ Stroud as a contender for the MVP? Last week, he was 100 to 1. 100 to 1 to win this award. Guess what he's down to now? 30 to 1. That is a major odd shift, and maybe he doesn't win the MVP this year. But if you look at his numbers, and especially over the weekend, the fact that, oh, by the way, the Houston Texans as 6-point dogs, plus 205 on the money line with a huge upset of the Cincinnati Bengals. Guess what? The Texans have the same record as the Cincinnati Bengals do, 5-4. And guess who led the game-winning drive? That would be CJ Stroud, who once again put up some monster numbers, 364 total yards of offense, 9.1 yards per attempt. And again, the game-winning drive that sealed the deal for a team that's now really in contention to win their division, just a couple games behind the Jaguars in the AFC South. So for me, it has to be CJ Stroud. You look at the season-long numbers, he's right up there with the best of the best, sitting at 15 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions, the second most passing yards in the league. So MVP of the weekend for me, CJ Stroud, Houston Texans.